There's a subtle but dangerous habit so many of us fall into when we deeply want to be seen, appreciated, and chosen. It's the habit of overproving, trying harder, showing up more, giving more, texting first. Being available, being agreeable, being better. It might feel like love, like loyalty, like dedication, but what it really is, beneath the surface, is a desperate need to be validated, and the sad irony. The more you try to prove your worth to someone, the more you train them to question it. Validation addiction doesn't look like a red flag at first. It looks like effort, like kindness, like being all in. You go the extra mile, not because it's asked, but because you want to show how much you care. You're thoughtful, you're invested, you're present, but over time, that investment becomes uneven. You start giving even when it's not reciprocated. You start hoping he'll eventually get it and return the same level of attention, but what you don't realize is that with every extra effort you make, without any energy mirrored back, you're teaching him that you're the one trying to earn him and not the other way around. What happens next is subtle, but soul shaking. He starts pulling back, not because you're not good enough, but because the energy shifts. He no longer feels the need to invest emotionally, because you're filling the space with your own overcompensation. The chase is gone, the mystery is gone, the balance is gone. What remains is you, performing a version of love that looks more like a one-woman show than a relationship, and deep down, you feel it. You start asking questions like, did I say too much? Was I too available? Should I have waited for him to reach out first? Why do I feel more insecure the more I give? Because your intuition knows. It knows you're not connecting from your center. You're reaching, and the more you reach, the more power you give away. Because here's the truth. When your energy is constantly trying to prove your value, you imply that your value is in question, and nothing makes someone take you for granted faster than the belief that you're trying to sell yourself. Men, and people in general, don't respond to desperation. They respond to value, and value isn't performed, it's owned. It's felt in your boundaries. It's seen in how you don't chase. It's heard in the silence after they stop trying. Value doesn't beg, it doesn't bargain, it doesn't campaign. It stands still and waits to be met. Now let's get even more honest. Why do we fall into this cycle in the first place? Because somewhere along the line, many of us were taught that love is earned. That we have to be a certain way to deserve attention, affection, or commitment. Maybe you were praised only when you performed. Maybe you learned that being quiet, agreeable, or endlessly helpful kept the peace. Maybe your earliest relationships trained you to believe that you had to earn your keep. So now, even as an adult, you find yourself in dynamics where your deepest fear is being too much or not enough, so you hustle. You shape, shift, you overextend, but the problem is, proving energy doesn't just exhaust you. It cheapens your presence in someone else's eyes, because anything that screams, I need you to validate me, creates pressure. And pressure kills attraction. The need for approval becomes a wall between you and true connection. It stops being about getting to know each other and starts being about performance. And eventually, you feel invisible. Like no matter what you do, it's never quite enough, but here's the truth that can set you free. You don't need to prove your worth, you need to own it. The moment you stop performing is the moment he has to see you. Without the glitter, without the over-effort, without the need to win him over, and sometimes that's the scariest part, because we fear that if we stop proving, he might walk away. But if he only stays because you're overperforming, that's not love, that's convenience. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate and by what you try to earn. If you constantly have to try to be enough, you're already giving away your power, and love, real love, doesn't require that kind of performance. It meets you where you already stand, so if you're stuck in the cycle of overgiving, over-texting, over-explaining, over-anything, pause, breathe, step back, and remind yourself that your worth isn't in how hard you try. It's in who you are. The minute you stop proving and start simply being, you'll not only feel more grounded, you'll begin to attract someone who values you because they see you, not because you convinced them to. One of the most misunderstood concepts in dating and relationships is detachment. People often confuse it with being cold, playing games, or acting like you don't care. But real detachment doesn't come from pretending, it comes from a powerful inner knowing. A quiet confidence, a self-assured stillness that says, I don't need to force anything to be chosen, and when you embody that energy, something remarkable happens. The dynamic shifts, not just in how he sees you, but in how the relationship begins to breathe. See, when you're constantly trying to control the outcome, whether it's how often he texts, what he thinks about you, or where the relationship is going, you're operating from anxiety, not alignment. And that anxious energy is felt, even if you don't say a word. It pushes, it clings, it tries to convince, and even if your intentions are good, it doesn't inspire desire, it creates pressure. And pressure isn't attractive. Presence is. Detachment is not indifference. It's not about withdrawing love or affection. It's about creating space, space for you to stay connected to your own center, space for him to step up of his own free will. Because the truth is, when you stop micromanaging a connection, you allow someone the opportunity to meet you not because they're being chased or persuaded, but because they genuinely want to. And that changes everything. When a man senses that you're not trying to manipulate the outcome, that you're not desperately trying to win him or bend into the version of yourself, you think he'll want you become different. You stand out. You're no longer noise, you're clarity, and clarity is rare. That kind of stillness, that detachment, is magnetic. It says, I'm not here to audition, I'm here to connect, and if this isn't aligned, I'm okay walking away. That kind of energy commands respect. It makes a man stop and think. It interrupts his patterns, because now the pressure is no longer on you to prove you're worthy. The pressure is on him to realize what's in front of him before it's gone. This is the paradox of desire. When you stop trying to control how someone sees you, you give them the space to actually feel you, to experience your presence without the performance, to sit in your energy without being chased or pulled. And in that stillness, that neutrality, they begin to recognize your value in a completely different way. Let me make this clear: detachment doesn't mean disappearing. It means detaching your identity from the outcome. It means showing up fully, with love, with presence, with openness, but without needing a specific response to feel whole. That's what makes you unshakable. That's what makes you powerful. Because no matter what he does or doesn't do, you don't collapse. You don't beg, you don't cling, you witness. And in that witnessing, you say, I know my worth. I'm not here to convince you of it. I'm here to live in it. And you can either meet me here or move aside. That energy doesn't just attract attention, it creates momentum. It builds a different kind of respect. It causes a man to reevaluate the way he's showing up, not because you told him to, but because your absence of neediness forced him to feel the difference. Because here's the truth. People often realize the value of something when they feel the possibility of losing it. When you're constantly in his space, constantly available, constantly initiating, there's no contrast, no urgency. But when you stop trying to prove, to control, to push, when you allow yourself to just be, you create a vacuum, a space that makes him ask, what's happening? Why do I feel her absence so strongly? And that is exactly the moment where desire is born. True detachment isn't about withholding love. It's about standing in your wholeness so that love becomes a choice, not a transaction. You're not here to be earned, bought, or begged for. You're here to be recognized, matched, and met. That's the difference between desperation and dignity, between needing someone to choose you and knowing that you choose yourself first. So if you've been pouring all your energy into trying to hold something together, pause. Pull back, detach, not to punish, not to manipulate, but to reconnect with your own power, because the moment you stop trying to prove anything is the moment he starts wondering what he's missing, and that's where the game truly changes. Let's talk about a subtle but powerful shift, the moment the chase reverses, the moment he starts wondering about you, thinking about you, missing you, craving you not because you're constantly showing up, but because you've pulled back. You've stopped performing, you've stopped chasing, and in that space, a truth begins to hit him. You were the one he should have been chasing all along. We've been sold a lie that says if we want to be chosen, we have to make ourselves obvious. Visible, always available, always proving. But here's what most people miss. Value is not felt in the noise. It's felt in the pause, in the absence, in the sudden silence where your energy used to be. See, when you're constantly showing up for someone, texting first, planning everything, initiating all the conversations, complimenting, reminding, giving, you create a dynamic where they don't have to pursue. You become the force keeping the connection alive, and the more you feed it, the more they pull back. Not because you're not amazing, but because there's no longer a space for them to step into. People don't chase what they know is always going to be there. They chase what feels valuable, what they sense could slip away. That's not manipulation, it's psychology. It's human nature. We don't cherish oxygen until we're gasping for it. We don't notice warmth until the room goes cold. Your constant presence, when unbalanced, becomes background noise, predictable, comfortable, and when something becomes too comfortable too quickly, it gets taken for granted not because it lacks value, but because it lacks space to be missed. Now, let's be clear, the point of pulling back is not to punish. It's to reset the energy dynamic. When someone no longer feels the need to pursue you, it's because they've become passive in the connection. Maybe because you've been doing the heavy lifting emotionally, maybe because they've gotten used to the attention without having to earn it. So when you pull back, when you stop chasing, when you shift from proving to simply being, something important happens. They suddenly feel the weight of what you were giving, the depth of your presence, the consistency, the warmth, the way you remembered the little things, the texts you used to send, the way you cared. And now it's not there. That space, that absence is the moment where clarity strikes, where they realize that the attention they once assumed was guaranteed was actually a gift, and the chase, the desire, begins not because you made a dramatic exit, but because your silence spoke louder than any words ever could. This is why the chase reverses, because when you stop trying to get them to see your worth, you give them a chance to feel your absence. And that feeling is powerful. It triggers curiosity, it creates tension, it wakes them up. But here's what makes it work. You're not pulling back out of insecurity, you're pulling back into yourself, into your wholeness. You're reclaiming your peace, your presence, your priorities. You're no longer using connection as your source of validation. You've become your own source, and that shift, that energetic shift, changes everything. Because now you're no longer the one trying to keep it all together. You've created a vacuum, and a vacuum either pulls someone in or reveals their inability to meet you where you are. So what does that look like in real life? It means pausing before sending that just checking in text. It means not rearranging your schedule for someone who won't do the same. It means choosing your peace over constant overthinking. It means remembering that if they don't step forward, you're not losing, they are. And the beauty is this: when the chase reverses, it's not about games, it's about gravity. You become a force they're drawn toward, not because you shouted your value, but because you stood still in it. You stopped proving, you stopped pushing, and in that stillness, your value spoke for itself. The truth is, the chase was never about who runs faster, it was about who holds more presence. And when you stop chasing anyone, you create the space for the right one to chase you, not out of ego, but out of genuine recognition of your worth. So if you've been doing the most and feeling the least in return, take a breath. Step back, let the silence say what your effort never could, and watch as the energy shifts. If he values you, he'll feel the distance and close it. If he doesn't, he was never going to. But either way, you win. Let's take a deep breath and be real for a moment. How many times have you caught yourself editing who you are just a little bit in hopes that he'll like you more? How many times have you swallowed a truth, reshaped a sentence, worn the version of you that felt safer than cool girl? The easygoing one, the one who doesn't ask for too much just to keep things flowing smoothly. It doesn't always feel like a performance. Sometimes it just feels like being smart, like protecting yourself, like doing what you have to do to not come across as needy or high maintenance or too emotional. But slowly, over time, this subtle performance becomes your identity. You wake up realizing that you've been achieving in your relationships instead of authentically existing in them. Here's the hard truth. You don't fall in love by being impressive. You fall in love by being seen, and you can't be seen if you're constantly curating your identity. So many women fall into this trap, believing that if they just do a little bit more, become a little bit cooler, support him harder, compromise a little more, then he'll love them fully, then he'll choose them. But relationships don't work like performance reviews. Love isn't something you earn by checking off imaginary boxes. It's something you invite through presence, truth, and vulnerability. Authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about showing up as you really are with your quirks, your passions, your flaws, your boundaries, and letting that be enough. Because it is, you are. The more you perform to be chosen, the more you rob yourself of the one thing that actually makes connection real, emotional intimacy. And emotional intimacy only exists when both people are being themselves. When you're constantly trying to perform at the highest version of yourself, the emotionally available, endlessly understanding, I'm fine with anything version, what you're really doing is abandoning your truth. And when you abandon your truth, you lose your power, you silence your desires, you shrink your voice, and worst of all, you train him to connect with a version of you that isn't even real. So he doesn't fall in love with you, he falls in love with the curated character you played in order to earn love. That's not connection, that's performance. The real magic happens when you give yourself permission to stop trying so hard. When you allow the pressure to melt away, when you stop viewing your worth through the lens of what can I do to be more lovable, and start asking, who am I when I'm not trying to be anything but me? Because the truth is, the right person doesn't want your highlight reel. They want you, the messy, complex, beautiful, evolving you, the one who has boundaries, the one who has opinions, the one who might say, actually, I'm not okay with that, instead of smiling through discomfort. That version of you is rare, and that's what makes you unforgettable. People fall in love with authenticity because it feels safe, real, grounded, and in a world full of perfectly filtered personas, your realness becomes a breath of fresh air. A man doesn't fall in love with how agreeable you are. He falls in love with how deeply you make him feel. And that only happens when you are feeling fully, without filtering yourself to be more digestible. So what does authenticity really look like in practice? It looks like saying what you mean without trying to calculate how it will land. It looks like being okay with someone not agreeing with you and not needing to morph into someone they'll approve of. It looks like allowing silence when you don't know what to say, instead of filling the space to seem more engaging. It looks like trusting that your presence is enough, even when you're not performing. When you stop trying to impress, you create a space for real love to take root. Because now, the man who chooses you isn't choosing the version of you you thought he wanted, he's choosing the actual you. And that kind of love, that's the kind you can build on. That's the kind that lasts. Remember, your power is not in your ability to overachieve emotionally. It's in your ability to rest in your truth. To know that your worth is not up for debate, and it never was. The most magnetic thing you can ever be is real. You don't need to be more anything. You need to be more you, no performance required. Let's talk about something quietly powerful, not loud, not dramatic, but magnetic. It's not the flirty text, the perfect outfit, or the witty banter that creates long-term attraction. It's your standards. Not the kind you shout from the rooftops, but the kind you live by, the kind that silently communicate, this is what I accept, this is what I will walk away from, this is who I am. See, a lot of people confuse standards with ultimatums. They think if you say, I'm not okay with this, that you're trying to control someone, but standards are the opposite of control. They are the surrender of control, because they say, I trust myself enough to walk away if something doesn't meet me where I am. When you have standards, real, grounded ones, you no longer feel the need to force someone to rise to them. You just let people show you who they are, and when someone falls short, you don't chase, you don't beg. You release with grace, with peace, with self-respect intact, and that's rare, that's unforgettable, that's attractive, because in a world where people are used to being accommodated, being coddled, being forgiven for behavior that doesn't match their words, your standards become a mirror. They reflect back to someone exactly what they're offering, and if what they're offering isn't enough, your silence, your absence, your boundary speaks louder than any conversation ever could. Here's the truth. A man doesn't value you more because you bend. He values you more when you don't, when you're kind, yes but firm, when you're warm but clear, when your energy says, I love connection, but I won't compromise my peace for it. That energy, that creates desire. Why? Because people are drawn to what they can't easily control, not in a manipulative way, but in a respect-based way. When someone knows that you're not just going to accept crumbs, they're either going to level up or fade out. And either way, you win, because you're not in this to convince someone of your worth. You're in this to be met, to be chosen, to be matched. Let's get really honest. If you don't enforce your standards, they're not standards. They're suggestions, and people don't respect suggestions, they respect consistency. If you say, I won't tolerate being ghosted, but keep responding when he reappears, your words mean nothing. If you say, I need emotional availability, but stay in a situationship hoping he'll change, you're teaching him how little effort he needs to give. Standards are the quietest, strongest language of self. Worth. They don't need to be loud. They don't need to be mean. They just need to be real, and the way you make them real is by standing by them, even when it's hard, even when you're lonely, even when the part of you that craves connection says, maybe this is enough, because it's not. And deep down, you know it, the amazing part, when you start living from your standards instead of your fear, the entire dating experience shifts. You're no longer attracted to chaos. You're no longer obsessed with being chosen. You're too busy choosing yourself. You walk differently, you speak differently, and people feel it. The men who want to play games, they don't stick around because they know they can't. The ones who are half in, half out, they disappear because your energy doesn't tolerate inconsistency. And the ones who are ready, they step forward because your boundaries don't scare them, they inspire them. This is why boundaries create desire, not because they're a strategy, but because they are rooted in deep, unwavering self-respect. You're no longer available for what doesn't serve you, and when that's your truth, everything that isn't aligned starts to fall away, and everything that is starts to find its way in. So, if you've been wondering why you're not being valued the way you want to be, ask yourself, what am I accepting that I know doesn't align with my worth? Where have I allowed someone to treat me less than I deserve, just because I was afraid of losing them? You don't raise your value by proving it. You raise it by protecting it, by walking away when it's not respected, by holding space for what you actually want, even when that space feels temporarily empty, because it's not empty, it's sacred. And when someone finally enters that space with clarity, consistency, and care, they won't have to wonder if they're the right one. They'll know, because you've already made it clear what right looks like. Let's break down what really makes someone unforgettable, not just physically attractive, not just nice, but deeply magnetic, the kind of person who lingers in someone's mind at 2 a.m., the kind of person who doesn't need to chase because they pull. Not with force, but with gravity, emotional gravity. Emotional gravity is that invisible pull we feel towards someone who is fully anchored in themselves. It's not about being loud. It's not about constantly texting or posting or being everywhere. In fact, the most unforgettable people are often the ones who know how to disappear well, not in a toxic way, but in a way that communicates, I am whole with or without your attention. See, attraction isn't just about what you give. It's about what you withhold. It's about the energy you keep for yourself. It's about restraint, mystery, self-possession, and the reason that works so powerfully is because most people are used to immediacy. Instant replies, constant validation, predictability. So when you don't offer all of yourself on a silver platter, when you're present but not performing, available but not clinging, it disrupts the pattern. You become the anomaly, the outlier, and that disruption is what leaves an imprint. Now, let's be clear, this isn't about playing games. It's about embodying self-respect so deeply that it naturally shapes how you show up. You don't reply instantly because you're not glued to your phone, wondering if he likes you. You don't rush to make plans because you already have a life you love. You don't open up your whole heart in the first 2 weeks because you understand that depth takes time and you're worth knowing slowly. This kind of emotional gravity starts with emotional security. When you're secure in yourself, you don't need constant validation. You don't panic at silence. You don't crumble at mixed signals. Why? Because you know that confusion isn't your home, clarity is. And if someone can't meet you with clarity, you exit. Calmly, gracefully, powerfully, think about the people who have stuck with you in your memory the longest. Were they the ones who over-explained, overgave, tried too hard? Or were they the ones who had a calm kind of certainty? The ones who didn't need to prove anything because who they were already spoke for them? That's what you're becoming. Not someone who floods someone else with attention hoping to earn affection, but someone who is the source of her own emotional current. Someone who holds her energy like gold and only invests it in people who value it. Emotional gravity also comes from emotional depth. You don't become unforgettable by being agreeable. You become unforgettable by feeling deeply, by sharing things that matter, by speaking from your soul, not to be impressive, but to be true. People remember how you made them feel, not what you said, and when you speak with vulnerability, with intention, with clarity, it cuts through the noise. But here's the twist. You also need lightness. You need joy. You need presence. Emotional gravity doesn't mean heaviness. It means range. You can hold space for deep conversation and laugh uncontrollably at something silly. You can be soft but unshakable, warm but not needy, playful but principled. That contrast, that dynamic, it's unforgettable. And perhaps most importantly, you become the person he can't stop thinking about when you are the person you can't stop becoming. When you are lit up from the inside out, when you are so focused on your evolution, your purpose, your peace, your passions that love becomes a bonus, not a lifeline, when a man enters your world, he doesn't feel pressure. He feels privilege because you're not just looking for love, you're offering a whole universe to explore. This is emotional gravity. It's not about begging for attention. It's about being the kind of woman who naturally commands it. Not because you asked for it, but because your energy is unforgettable, because you move with intention, because you know exactly who you are, what you want, and what you're no longer available for. So if you want to be the one who stays in his mind, stop thinking about how to be more impressive. Start becoming more intentional. Stop trying to keep him and start keeping your peace, your energy, your standards. That's where the power is.